Hi, I'm Lauren Moore. I'm the State Librarian in New York. So grateful for this opportunity to connect with the New York Library Association community today. Today, I will be joined with some members of the Regents Advisory Council. I have Nate Hill, Arlene Way, and Grace Riario. But I'm going to start off this presentation by sharing a clip of an interview with Interim Commissioner Betty A. Rosa, who's just been a fantastic leader for the State Education Department and who spent a few minutes speaking about her goals for the Education Department and for libraries in New York. And then after that conversation, I'll be facilitating a conversation with Arlene, Nate, and Grace as representatives of the Regents Advisory Council who can give their perspective on libraries now, right in this moment, and libraries in the future. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this presentation. Hi, I'm Lauren Moore. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Libraries and New York State Librarian. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with Dr. Betty A. Rosa, Interim Commissioner of Education. Dr. Betty A. Rosa assumed the role of Interim Commissioner of Education and President of the University of the State of New York effective August 14, 2020. Since September 2008, Dr. Rosa has served as a member of the Board of Regents and as Chancellor thereof from March 2016 through the effective date of her resignation on August 13, 2020. She started her career with the New York City Department of Education as a paraprofessional and later served as a teacher, assistant principal, principal in the Bronx, and upon appointment, assumed the responsibilities of Superintendent of Community School District 8, then Senior Superintendent of the Bronx. Dr. Rosa is a nationally recognized education leader who has over 30 years of instructional and administrative experience with an expertise in inclusive education, cooperative teaching models, student achievement, and policy implementation. She received a BA in psychology from the City College of New York and a master's degree in education and doctorate in education in administration, planning, and social policy from Harvard University, as well as 2 other Master of Science in Education degrees, one in administration and supervision, and the other in bilingual education from the City College of New York and Lehman College, respectively. Welcome, Commissioner. Thank you so much for joining the library community at the New York Library Association's conference today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I am thrilled to be here with you to absolutely share some of our best thinking when it comes to the work that the department is doing as it relates to our libraries. As you know, it's imperative that the department continue its important work without interruption. I am dedicated to providing that constancy and as interim commissioner to ensure the stability that we need for our students during this unprecedented time. I intend to lead the department with compassion, empathy, and hope. And I'm committed to utilizing all of the department's resources to help schools, districts, and libraries to support students and staff during these exceedingly challenging days.
So what are your most pressing and immediate goals for the department?
We have several, and one of them is supporting our schools, particularly with the issue of making sure that our schools are physically and have social emotional support systems in order to be successful in terms of our children. We want to create environments where children feel as close to prior to the pandemic, where the school's environment and that landscape continues with teaching and learning. Another one is looking at our models, current models, and figuring out how do we support these models, whether it's in-person, hybrid, or looking at remote. How do we maintain the quality of these models so that the teaching and learning process continues? The issue of digital equity is extremely important. The infrastructure, the resources that are needed to make sure that while we're doing remote learning or remote teaching and learning, that our students have the right resources and that our teachers and our school personnel can support that learning. The final one is making sure that we have the funding, the support in terms of funding for our libraries, funding for our schools, and making sure that there's relief of regulatory issues so that we create opportunities for our students, our staff, to continue to do this work during these challenging times.
You mentioned digital equity. Can you talk more about that and what that means to you in the department?
But digital equity is one of those situations that we are paying attention to. Not only the Board of Regents, the department, but the field in general has had to grapple with this equity issue. As a matter of fact, in the spring, we did a survey to find out, to look at the infrastructure, devices. We looked at issues of broadband. And the fact of the matter is we had some semblance, I would say, of about 50% support, 50% responses. We are going back out with the information into lessons learned into the future. Actually, we know that some of our students have been, in many ways, their education has been impacted by the lack of resources, the lack of having the kinds of internet access that is so needed for their education to continue. The issue of digital equity sits on the minds of all that are involved in this endeavor. In addition, we must get an accurate picture of the state digital equity access. It is imperative that we do so in order to create an accurate response to this issue. We realize that in terms of solution, access in places where students receive care beyond our schools is essential. Our libraries are natural places. They're natural partners. And this is a place where innovation and looking at digital innovation can take place. So we're so excited about an inclusive process in terms of including our libraries in looking at our solutions.
That's great. So what do you see as the role of libraries during the pandemic?
They have played an amazing role during the pandemic. Librarians have stepped up and have continued to support our children, our communities, and our teachers. They have provided everything from facilitating, lending, computers, hotspots. They've also been places where children have continued to connect with the process of reading, the process of learning in a safe environment that continues to celebrate their learning.
Now that you're serving as interim commissioner, are the Regents continuing their search for a permanent commissioner?
The Board of Regents' efforts are focused on the safe reopening of schools and a safe school year in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. Recognizing that the search has already taken and the paramount task ahead of the board, the search for the commissioner's position has been extended.
Thank you so much for your time, Commissioner, and thank you for your thoughtful responses about libraries. We're so glad to be working with all of our other partners in the State Education Department to make sure that every single New Yorker has access to lifelong learning opportunities.
Thank you for the work that you continue to do, and we are so grateful to have you as part of our family.
Thank you. So Nate and Grace, thank you for being here today. You're two of my favorite people to talk libraries with, and I am hoping that you'll be comfortable sharing some information or sharing your thoughts about what's happening with libraries now and in the future. So let's start with the first question, which is, what's happening in libraries right now? What are the immediate priorities? What are the short-term goals? What do we need to work through as we figure out what's happening in this world and where libraries fit in?
You want to start, Nate?
Sure. And I'm sure we can just kind of go back and forth on this stuff since we're both thinking about it like all of the time, right? What I'm seeing with the membership at Metro is a real focus on figuring out how to open and open safely, as well as at the same time thinking about how services can be delivered remotely and, and what's the right combination of these things. So safety is kind of at the top of everybody's list. And there's this real need right now to stay very current with the information, because so much is changing day to day in what we know about the world that we're living in. So I don't know. I think that's what I'm seeing. How about you, Grace?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sometimes we don't think about the mental health of the employees that work in our libraries, especially part-time, right? You think that they can come in and do a couple of hours of work and it will not affect their life. It does affect significantly, especially when the environment within the library could be hostile, with the patrons not wanting to wear a mask and trying to fight every step of the way of any safety procedure we put in place. So even 2 hours of a part-time worker, is a huge difference. So I agree, Nate. I'm glad that you did that.
The emotional labor that our workforce is dealing with right now is just it's intense.
Yeah, I agree.
We're joined by Arlene Way, who's the chair of the Regents Advisory Council. Hi, Arlene. We're discussing right now the immediate goals and priorities of libraries in these really difficult times. And we're just talking about the emotional labor and the mental health concerns that we all share for library workers on the front lines right now. Do you think this is a new situation, or do you think that these conditions already existed in the library world?
Well, I think they did existed in the library world. I think mental health has always been in our environment. I just think that it has never been as acute as it is now. I mean, I think the emotions of the public coming into the building are very acute. I think folks get very angry very quickly. And sometimes the emergency button that we all have has been enhanced. So things that could have been considered an emergency before, will not have been considered an emergency before, are considered an emergency now, just because of the environment that we're in today. And I do think that our libraries have always been very keen on making sure that our employees feel comfortable when it comes to dealing with anger from the patrons, right? But now, like I said, everything has been a bit acute.
Are there strategies that are working? Are there things that are happening in libraries to protect the safety and emotional well-being of library workers and the community members they're serving? Or what are you seeing?
Well, I think what Nate just brought up it's a good point. Having a space for people to speak to each other that are doing the same work, having safe space for them to discuss things that they can't talk to their boss about, or they may feel that they're going to lose their job if they complain too much is very important. I mean, we have a coalition of library workers in our system. Is the RCLS coalition of library workers of color, and this group of folks get together probably every 2 weeks just to discuss matters that affect them, and they feel comfortable enough to talk to each other. So it's sort of like counseling without having a counselor per se.
Yeah, we have very similar things going on with Metro, and it's been interesting to watch the shift from, we've had a ton of online programming since the earliest phases of this. And at first we were doing a lot of deep, nerdy library training things, and everybody needed something to do, right? And so they were attending it. But now it's more of these kinds of community calls, these more open discussions where people really just need to be together and support one another. So it's been interesting to watch that shift, and it's very hard to think, about longer term planning around programming now, right? Like where is it going to go next? It's complicated.
Arlene, is there anything you wanted to add about the immediate priorities of libraries?
Well, I'm listening to what you just shared and what was asked about, it's just something that's been going on all the time, if it's become a heightened situation. And I think it varies for the different communities. So there are some neighborhoods that have always had to deal with issues around homelessness, dealing with people who are homeless, dealing with people who are using our bathroom to do drugs, that kind of thing. And folk coming in with some serious issues that they're bringing into the library with them. But the library has been a home in many instances to people being able to make next steps in their lives, for adults, for children, and all of that. And so, and staff have always been in a situation where, they have to adjust who they are to deal with whatever it is they're dealing with at the time, with compassion and understanding. And sometimes they don't always have the skill sets that are necessary. So I am aware of training that has gone on, and effort to see what we could do to bring more diversity to our workforce, because there's some instances where the staff does not look at all like the people that they're serving. So there is that. How do we bring in elements of cultural competency and comfort? So that's all part of dealing with some of the other social or societal issues that we're suddenly being confronted with. And as Nate was saying earlier, and Grace too, is that staff have issues too. They have worries that they are personally dealing with, in addition to what is going on within their very changed work environment, as we're all trying to reopen and get back to service. So it's a fluid thing. And so libraries are going to have to look at all of that. And I suppose find some additional collaborations to work with. I know for us, when we were having at one of our branches a lot of fighting going on. Teenagers getting into stuff, and we turned it into a community conversation where we brought in the police and even the kids to talk about what was going on, and came up with some strategies for how we would manage certain things, if there were structures we could put into place. So I guess what I'm saying is that some places have always had some challenges, more so than others. And as we're reopening, there are going to be some additional challenges. And I guess it's fluid in terms of being available for training and conversation, and giving people the opportunity to share concerns without fear of losing their jobs. So that's a whole nother thing.
So acknowledging the fluidity of the situation, and I think it's something you all touched on, that there's a sort of, we're responding in the moment as things change, and they're constantly changing. What is the role of libraries during COVID-19?
Well, I think a role has not changed that much. I think we still are the safe place where people seek information. Even we are not, our doors were not open. I can tell you during the lockdown, a lot of folks went to the library's website to find information, to find links and resources. They were waiting. We called folks at home to see how they were doing, if they got any information, because we knew there was a lot of folks that would live by themselves and didn't have anybody else that would call them. If we called them to make sure that they were okay, they knew that the information we were providing about what the social services available to them was going to be correct, and it was going to be factual. So we still have the trust of the community about the information we're putting out. So I think that has not changed. I think it has escalated more. As Nate said before, we have to be more educated about what's going on. We have to be informed about the changes that are happening, because when a librarian speaks, it means she's speaking the truth, and that has not changed.
You know what's stressing me out about all of this, and it's not just in the pandemic, but it's like pushing toward the post-pandemic as well, is I just think it's really important that we drive the role of libraries and we don't simply get everything handed to us. I mean, I think that's a real concern because, you know, we're here to help, right? Like it's like literally what we do. And so anything comes at libraries and we say, all right, we'll take it on. And I think that there is an opportunity for each library or groups of libraries to find those moments where they create some parameters, draw a line in the sand, say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to make, you know, to help this community. But you know, this other thing that's getting pushed on us without any funding, we're going to push back a little bit and say that there's somebody else who should do that job. I get really nervous right now because we're just in such a difficult place as a state, as a country. We can't solve every problem at libraries.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Nate, but the one thing that we have that a lot of organizations don't have is the ability to connect. I can tell you, I have many of the libraries in my system have connected with their partners. And even though they are not the ones solving the problem, they know who can and who can help. And I do agree with you. Sometimes we are pushed to the limit to serve our communities to a point that we can no longer do because the funding is not there. And it's going to continue that way. But about the role of the library in the future, I don't think that's going to change much. I think we need to be more open about saying, like you said, no, we cannot do that anymore. We need somebody else to do that, and finding that somebody else that could help us. I think that would be very much important in the future, and even no future, just tomorrow.
Arlene, do you have anything to add?
I'm just thinking about being proactive, and I'm not accusing anybody of not being proactive, but because we are in a space that is constantly evolving, even before COVID, to be positioned to be that good connector or most effective connector, we have to have good partners or be expanding our circle of partnerships so that we can have conversations with others that we can engage on a proactive basis. What I'm finding and what's become more, I don't know why this has been an issue, because for a long time there's been this conversation about the digital divide and how some communities just didn't have access. So we have some libraries that have been able to maintain good contact with neighborhoods because that neighborhood is connected digitally. You know, they have access to the computers and they can benefit from online services. But we have within the same city neighborhoods that don't have access to broadband. You know, and so we always complained about and always talked about the digital divide, but when the school district went virtual and didn't have ability to connect with such large segments of its children, of its population, because they didn't have access to the community, I mean, to broadband or to computers, and they will say, well, you know, you could use the smartphones, and realize so many people did not have smartphones that could give them the capacity they needed to get work done. So I guess the thinking is that we have to think more broadly in terms of who we're partnering with. And so if we are meeting with the Chamber of Commerce on a regular basis, if we have partnerships that not only include the school district, but include corporations, include Chamber of Commerce, and we could start to anticipate what some of the needs are, or when things come to us, be able to reach out to these guys and say, look, this is what we got going on. I think that can help with coming up with some different kinds of, or some additional solutions, and get some help in terms of the finances, because we can't do everything. We have constraints just like everybody else does, but we are that central place that everybody comes to for assistance. I think we just have to, libraries need to intentionally look at broadening its partnerships and how it works with a much wider community.
So in my conversation with Commissioner Rosa, she listed digital equity as really both a short-term, immediate priority, but also a long-term goal for the Department of Education. And she also drew a clear line between that work and libraries in the state. What do you think about libraries' roles in terms of addressing digital inequities, working towards digital equity? Do you think that's something that we've done well as a community, or something that we need to do more on, or what are your thoughts?
I think there's work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
There's work to be done. Okay, we've done well with services that we provide, and communities that are already enriched are going to be all right. It's those communities that don't have access to broadband, you know, and how do we address that? And I know that I'm aware of libraries that have purchased laptops that, you know, folk could take home, but it's not enough to close the gap for many communities. And that's where we get to having the conversations with other partners, you know, going wider with, and maybe this is something that needs to happen on the state level, and assist that way, to be building relationships with Microsoft and Verizon and IBM to address this, you know, and the department to address this issue about how to close the digital divide.
So I agree completely with all of that. And I think digital equity is a great lens through which to go back to the prior question about the role of libraries. And you can look at this and say, all right, absolutely. In order to achieve this, we need a whole constellation of partners in order to be tackling a complex issue from so many different sides. But equally important to building that network of partners and understanding how to work with them, is to know how to define your core offering. Like, what is the key thing that libraries are bringing to the table in that conversation? And there definitely are things and just being very explicit about that, because I don't think that there is a great value proposition when you simply say we are the master of all partners, right? You need to really define your work equally well.
I think I agree with that, because I mean, the broadband issue is incredibly huge for just a library to take it on itself in a community. There is a lot of things that need to be thought. I can tell you one thing: libraries are not very good at business. We are not good at putting together a contract that is not going to get us in trouble. We are not good at selling our services without getting paid for what they're worth. We can't even get librarians to get paid well for the job they do, even though they have an MLS. So getting in a table with a company and not knowing exactly what we're offering would be not very good for that library. But I think we are, we do have an asset when it comes to the broadband issue. I mean, there's more libraries in the United States than there is Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. So I think that we do have a role to play. I just don't know what role that is yet. And about the literacy, I think we have tried to communicate to our partners and to the community itself that just getting an internet access, that does not mean that you understand the internet and you can use it. I think that part we have done not such a great job about communicating that. We have tried to communicate. We have tried to educate the community about what the effects of the internet and privacy and all that is about. Have we done a good job? I don't think so. Can we do better? Yes, I will definitely say so.
Could this be a conversation at the state ed level with the major corporate partners about how to address this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I can see libraries being able to assist in terms of providing access to information. but I think listening to what Grace said, that some libraries might not feel comfortable doing, and when I was talking about what we might do locally, I'm thinking about getting with the local Chamber of Commerce's, you know, and talking to those guys. But I'm thinking on a larger, on a higher scale, broader scale, that if SED could have that conversation, because the problem is not just about libraries, it's how do we support schools and school districts and learning? How do we do that if we have a situation where it's going virtual and half of our population, I'm just throwing the half out there, but a significant number of the people we're trying to assist don't have access to it, can't get it. How can we solve that problem? And so I'm thinking if we could do like a statewide thing through SED and libraries on that level, that could help us to get to some support for libraries on the regional and local levels.
Yeah, that's such a great question, Arlene. I do know that the State Education Department is working on scheduling a digital equity summit that will most likely take place in early 2021. Because just as you're saying, the department acknowledges that you can't solve this immense problem with just one entity. Schools can't do it on their own. Libraries can't do it on their own. It's going to involve so many partners coming together, understanding the deep and systemic roots to these problems, and being committed to solving them together, and knowing that it might take a while, and it might take strategies that have never been put in place before, but it's demanded and we need it. Your estimate is not too far off. The best estimates show that 25% of students in New York don't have internet access at home.
Well, I can tell you, for me, I started to get involved in the Sullivan County project, right? The Sullivan County has an amazing project where they're going to be building towers around the county, and the county has about 56% of their population that don't have broadband. So I started to talk to the county because I wanted to make sure that the libraries were included in this project. And how are they going to be included is the question, right? What can we offer to a county that has already started to create something, to a company that is coming in to build towers that they're going to be making money out? So it's very interesting to me because we all come from a different angle. So libraries are about social justice. We are doing this because we want to provide internet and information to people. We are not here to make money. We want to make sure that every single child has the same opportunity that the next one next door. However, a company is not going to come to your community and build a tower if they're not going to make money. And a county is not going to do all this work if they don't get a political angle to it. So you see, you put the three angles together and hopefully something comes up, but each partner brings something to the table and we all need to be respectful of what the angle is. But I know I'm here for just social justice. That's the reason why I got involved in the broadband issue in Sullivan, but they are there for other reasons.
Well, I don't care what they're there for as long as we're all having our needs met.
Correct. But that's the key that Nate is trying to say. We do need to know what the role of the library is, and that role cannot switch.
Let me give you a totally different example, because I think that we're very frequently taking digital equity and equating it to broadband access, but of course there are so many different facets to it, right? And it's an easy road to go down. An example of a project that we're working on that perhaps isn't immediately obvious as digital equity work and is very kind of like classic library-ish is a software project in which we have created a framework for digital collections, your photographs, whatever any community happens to be producing as their media. And using this particular framework, folks are empowered to describe things in their own terms, right? Because there's power in description and the way you choose to describe your community. So rather than some of the classic library power structures that we've employed, where we take and we have, authoritative standards coming from the Library of Congress that are probably racist, right? we take and empower people to describe their assets in a new way, right? And so, and then to make it interoperable, you can work with any of these other systems. I definitely think of this as like digital equity work. I definitely think of this as one of the building blocks. And one of the things that I feel great about with it is that it feels very much within our purview. Like we have, this is library work, we have control over this work. It can be a component to any number of bigger initiatives.
The other angle that I think is so, I mean, and I think it's one of the reasons why libraries are at these tables, or why they built these tables in many cases in terms of digital equity, is that we are witness to everything in our communities, or witness to many things in our communities, which is a really powerful role I think public libraries play. And I think from the beginning of the internet being part of people's lives, or computers being part of people's lives, public libraries especially were there trying to help get people online, and they saw the challenges from the very beginning. And I think that libraries maybe understood this before other sectors did, but it's not enough to just give someone an internet connection and a computer. There's so many other barriers to access and then success once they've gotten those tools. And that libraries have been doing that work of trying to train and trying to help people understand how to purchase their service, or how to use their connections, how to use their computers, how to do it safely. And that has to remain part of the conversation, because even if at the state level there's a solution that says, oh, everyone has broadband now, everyone has a Chromebook, if there aren't people also supporting those parents of students, or also making sure that people who speak languages other than English, or people with disabilities, or other people who are typically excluded from this experience, if there's not anyone helping to be their voice, helping to make sure that they have the skills and tools they need to get online, the disparities will continue. They'll continue to grow, and they'll persist. So that's one of the interests that I think I have and the department has. And it seems like it's a role that libraries are just the natural partner for. So one, kind of following up on that line of thinking, what do you think is the role of libraries within education, and not just K-12 or P-12 education, but in education in general? Do libraries have a role in that space, and what is it now, and what will it be?
I mean, for me, at least in my experience, the library has always been that curiosity and creativity partner with the rest of the formal education system. And that's been true my whole life, since I was like a little kid going to the library straight up through college. You have your formal learning environment, and then there's this like amazing place where you can start to explore and really get into your own moments of geeking out on whatever it happens to be. There's obviously a lot more to it, but I mean, that's my very personal take on it.
That's great.
I think libraries should be working hand in glove with their local educational institutions, really. There needs to be conversations about curriculum and what materials, what kind of activities could be delivered both in school and in the community to help to create that environment that everybody, and I'm looking at all levels, because what I'm also finding is college students also need access to libraries too, on and off of campus. So we need to be hand in glove in that conversation about what it's going to look like and what is needed. We need to be partners in the conversation. The problem is that I'm not sure that we talk enough, that we have those conversations enough about how we should be working together and how we can support each other. A thing that I'm keenly aware of is that there are a number of schools that do not have school libraries. And so the only access children or anybody's going to have to the library is what's in the community. Okay, so you definitely need to have conversations there about how libraries can support. So I'm just thinking that that is something that needs to be encouraged at the state level, at the district level. And especially heightened now during COVID, we need to see how we can combine our resources to make learning possible for everybody.
You know, Arlene, that lack of school libraries in every school drives me crazy. When I think back to, like, I was a pretty annoying kid in like 6th grade, and I would go and I would get to my school library and I would snag all of these books, and then I would go and hide in the back of the classroom when class was kind of boring, and I would read them, and it was great. And just like the thought that like every kid doesn't have access to their own kind of pathways of exploration that should be like right down the hall from them. It's just not okay. We really, really need those.
But the fascinating thing is, it's always, the conversation is always about libraries reaching out to the schools. I can tell you, I've been a librarian for a long time, and I've never had a school reach out to me as a public library. It has always been the public library reaching out to the schools. And I've seen that is very successful when the partnership is there. But I've also experienced the blocks of the schools not wanting the public library to be involved in their business. So when you talk about partners, I think it has to be both ways, right? It can't be just the public library trying to fulfill whatever gap the school doesn't have. It has to be the school also reaching out to the public library a little bit and trying to work together. It can't be just one person going at it, not the other person. But I can say to you that I agree, the partnership is very successful when it works well. We have had many of our public libraries are working really well with the schools with this whole online classes. So there's many libraries that are helping with the curriculum of the students. Right now, our youth consultant is working on developing some IT classes for the students, so the teachers don't have to spend 20 minutes of their class time teaching the kid how to use their Zoom or how to use their new computer they got or how to help mom figure it out. We're trying to put those programs together to help the schools. So I do know that it works, but I would love to see the schools also reaching out to the public libraries or to the libraries in general, really.
So for the sake of New York State, could this be something that is guided by SED, where the department, okay, requires it as being part of the plan that every district submits for how it is collaborating with the library?
Amen to that. If that happens, I'll be very happy, because that will make a lot of principals think twice about saying no when a public librarian is knocking on their door going, hey, I have some things to give you. That might be helpful.
Okay, good. So
I'm going to use my extremely bureaucratic voice and move on to the next question, because I cannot answer, but it has been noted.
Are you noting the suggestion though? Because it's not
Yes.
going to happen in all places. Some places principals and superintendents are willing partners, and in other places they're not. But for the sake of our people of the state of New York, we need to make sure that we're going to get some support in this.
So I know Nate has to leave. Nate, one last question for you. If you can spare 30 seconds.
I just told him not to leave.
Is there an important long-term goal that we need to be thinking about? If you just want to, there's one.
On the spot, I had notes and I was in one room and I switched rooms and I didn't bring the notes. The long-term goal. I think that there is a goal of sort of sticking to our guns and remaining who we are, right? Like let's just, no matter what this world throws at us, we need to remember our core values. We need to be able to adapt, and we need to take care of people and take care of our communities and listen to our communities. Actually, that's like more important than anything else. Yeah, yeah. I don't think you know, we're always working on changing and addressing the latest issue, but just sticking to our core, the common thread.
What do you think, Arlene?
I think having school districts incorporate how they will work with libraries into the plan that they deliver to the SED. I think that should be a long-term commitment.
What do you think, Grace?
Well, I think we have to, I agree with Nate. I think don't forget your core values is primary number one. I never want to forget that we stand for social justice, for privacy, and for people. We may have a nice collection of books at the library. We may have a nice collection of e-content, but we are in the people business, and that will never change. No matter how the environment change, how horrendous the weather gets, whatever it is, we will always be in the people business.
So thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a pleasure. I love speaking about libraries with you. So thank you, Arlene Way, the chair of the Regents Advisory Council and a trustee of the Albany Public Library and the executive director of the Arbor Hill Development Corporation. And thank you to Grace Riario, the executive director of the Ramapo Catskill Library System, and Nate Hill, the executive director of the Metro Library Council. Originally, this was intended to be a conversation with the library community, which wasn't able to happen because of our format change, but I would love to hear from you. So anyone who's watched this conversation and would like to share their feedback, their thoughts, their perspective, please send us an email. You can send an email to nyslibrary@nysed.gov. So that's nyslibrary@nysed.gov, nysed.gov. And we would love your feedback and know that our goal is to continue to engage the community as we think about the State Library's 5-year plan and the Regents Advisory Council's long-term vision document. Thank you very much, Arlene, Grace, and Nate. Thank you to Al and Diane who helped set this up. And thank you to Commissioner Rosa who spent time to speak about libraries with me.